Welcome at the third day of the Transformation Conference. Today we rearrange our room a little bit, and I think it will be rearranged a few times today. This Transformation Conference is also a result of our Change Now partnership, and one of our partners is Amsterdam Academy, and Laura Kall is a dean from the academy, and now she is going to invite the lectures of the next presentation.
Thank you. So, yes, it's passing on introductions, so I will now be introducing some other people. But yes, my name is Laura Kall O'Mallachar. I'm what they call in the Netherlands the lector, which is the head of the research unit for the Academy of Theatre and Dance in Amsterdam. And I'm also the head of DAS Graduate School, which is where we have our master's programs. And thank you very much to all of the organizers for having us here today, and Monica and all of the rest of the team who have been extremely busy helping us to prepare, so thank you so much. So I'm really delighted to introduce my colleagues who are going to lead this session. And as the title suggests, Letters from Lying Down, just to repeat the invitation, they would like to invite you to lie down to listen to these letters in order to appreciate the form and the way in which they were written. So I'll just briefly introduce my two colleagues who you can see. Hello, lovelies. Carly and Mira. So on the left, you can see Carly Everard, who is a costume scenographer. Recent projects include the costume design for the Trojan Wars and Queer Planet at HNT Young, and in collaboration with Lisbeth Kolthoffen und Zenen and Miruloy in Bochum and Berlin. Miruloy received her Faust for Best Youth Theatre Direction in Germany last season. Carly received the Proscenium Prize for their entire oeuvre in 2022. As a teacher-researcher in the scenography department at our Academy of Theatre and Dance in Amsterdam, she's a member of the Embodied Knowledge Research Group, where she researches questions of costume, space, and embodiment from an intersectional, practice-oriented perspective. Carly received the ATD Teacher-Researcher Fellowship Grant for the year 2022-23, and this is a new fellowship that we've just created. So Carly was the first recipient of this prize, which various existing collaborations can be further developed, including the one with Mira Thompson, where teaching material is created on disability justice in art practices. Also with Selm Merel Venselaers as a follow-up to the Dear Inclusive One letters that appeared in the Dutch newspaper Theaterkrant, in which they shared the curatorship of Shebang issue 3, exploring the importance of a trans view of an in-performance. From February to October 2023, a taped conversation between the artist Mary Evans and Carly Everard is part of Evans's exhibition, Gilt, at Zeist Mocha, exploring the colonial histories of their two countries in both of their practices. And on the right, you can see our colleague Mira Thompson. Mira is a singer-songwriter. Oh, no, wrong one. Wrong bio, Mira, sorry. Mira Thompson is a singer, songwriter, and performer, informed by the tradition of vocal jazz. She is drawn to narrative song and strong poetic and visual elements within music. During her time at HKU Utrecht Conservatory, she developed a fascination for the different ways in which the voice can function as an embodied instrument. Whether written, spoken, or sung, Mira wields language to evoke deep and buried feelings with an earnest yet witty approach, and I can attest to the wit. Within her own artistic practice or that of others, cross-disciplinary collaboration is at the heart of Mira's work. She writes on subjects of disability, language, and activism to contemplate a more accessible world. Invested in embodied learning and disability justice, Mira brings into question notions of accessibility and its universality through lectures, workshops, and consultancy to organizations, tutors, and students. Dear colleagues, Mira and Carly, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning, everyone. We would really like you to lie down. Sorry, we have a strange sound. It's the microphone. So we still would really urge you to lie down and make yourself comfortable and to listen to our letters that are about our collaboration. Mira, it's up to you. Is everybody comfortable? Everybody lying down?
Make sure you can be in the same position for a while because
Yes.
it will take a while.
Yes. People still
Wonderful.
get ready. Yeah, look at that. Still some movement
I
there.
will start in a little bit, just letting you all find your comfortable position.
See one more person looking around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dear Carly, yesterday night when I couldn't sleep, I started thinking about how our ongoing collaboration has changed me, because it has changed me profoundly. This collaboration means I don't only talk about the embodiment we so often try to explain in our lessons, but actually live it ourselves while working. Maybe this is exactly what disabled thinker and writer Mia Mingus means when she talks about access intimacy. She describes it as that elusive, hard to describe feeling when someone else gets your access needs. The kind of eerie comfort that your disabled self feels with someone on a purely access level. Sometimes it can happen with complete strangers, disabled or not, or sometimes it can be built over years. It could also be the way your body relaxes and opens up with someone when all your access needs are being met. It's not dependent on someone having a political understanding of disability, ableism, or access. Some of the people I have experienced the deepest access intimacy with, especially able-bodied people, have had no education or exposure to a political understanding of disability. That was Mia Mingus' quote. I never thought it was possible to experience what you preach in such a literal way in a professional setting. It never happened to me. I always say to the students, our body always means something, always brings something, and even always lacks something. Our body produces a different meaning in every context, but somehow this was applied in our collaboration without me realizing it. Our Zoom working sessions take place with me lying down on the couch, while taking notes on my phone with my right hand and talking to you via my laptop, which I hold steady with my left hand. This was always something I tried to hide for everyone on the other side of the screen. What would my colleagues gain from my pain Would they think I'm not working hard enough? Would they not ask me back for advice or questions when they see I live horizontally for a good amount of the day? This is all my problem to deal with, is what I thought. How ironic it is that all of my work around disability justice is about dismantling these ideas. The work we do, I do, always places individual experience into a societal context. I know that this is not my problem to deal with. I know we all, as a society, have to take into account the needs people who live by a different tempo, a different way, a different brain. Disability allows us to make room for another artistic aesthetic, another way of working and being together, and another way of producing art. This is where change happens. Yet me lying down did not add up with this knowledge. I have to admit that the way I thought of my horizontal working habit was also heavily influenced by the students. How can I ask them to be so vulnerably honest with us when we ask them about their own experience with access intimacy, while I'm not peeling off these layers of shame myself? When one student shared her time in the hospital, crying and holding hands with her friend, who was admitted to that same hospital with the same serious illness, I felt like I was betraying her. The student, who was visibly distressed, folded her hands over her face, a visual representation of shame, and looked at me after slowly lowering her hands. I didn't know it then, but I want to thank her.
Beautiful thing, these insights that come while lying awake. A bed sounds like a very appropriate place to articulate thoughts around intimacy, but also the way our body tells us things too. While lying down, you get to understand what lying down means for you. Your body, as you share with us, practices lying down a lot. As a teacher, I feel strongly what we can learn not only through exchanging ideas, but to share our embodied experiences. I developed this radical thinking course at the Academy of Theatre and Dance, especially around this idea, to learn to contextualize these embodied experiences in a larger societal context, to use one's embodied experience by researching theorists and artists who analyze the world through an intersectional lens. When I asked you to become a teacher in this course that was developed for the second year students at the sonography department at the Academy, I also could not fathom how crucial your exchanges with the students were going to be. That you brought this profound term, access intimacy, into the room. I do not want to call it a definition because it's so wonderfully elusive, not a categorization, but a way of thinking through and staying with the trouble. It makes things come to the surface by taking time, by being attentive, by taking care. You also try to explain in your lesson why you like the English word care so much more than the Dutch word zorg, as zorg expresses more worry. The first time you taught your access intimacy class, this group of second year students had been studying mostly on their own due to COVID, being isolated, not to be able to grow as a group. They seemed socially very awkward. But showing your music video Tiny Shoes and having them read and think of an access intimacy moment of their own seemed to open them up to you and me and each other. It seemed to open up the kind of interdependency we are trying to articulate as an important practice. Could it be that a horizontal practice could help us understand how to produce knowledges and exchanges that are non-hierarchical? As you said, these exchanges are mutually beneficial. Sharing these intimate moments made you embrace your horizontal practice as just as professional as sitting up straight is supposed to be. Do you remember that we put in a proposal to show the video lesson we made out of your Access Intimacy class in a symposium? That we wanted to share it while all the participants were lying down too? The idea came because I did sense you becoming uncomfortable, that you had to lay down while we were working. So we decided we were both going to lie down during the remainder of our Zoom session. We could not articulate yet what kind of knowledge we were producing, that we were trying a funny kind of access intimacy, creating things horizontally. Could that become the perfect metaphor for interdependency?
Dear Carly, it turns out to be a tough practice to respond to your lovely letter. I do have lots to say, yes, but your letter almost seems like an ending, a conclusion to what we are creating together. I must have read it 6 times before having an idea about how to acknowledge your thoughts, while also bringing in more of our fruitful and thought-provoking conversations into this correspondence. Let me start by saying how much I admire the existence of your radical thinking course. Never underestimate the immense value of a teacher like you, who dreams instead of knows, who starts with the notion of something that is not yet there, something that can exist without it being recognized yet, who, in popular terms, thinks outside of the binary of right or wrong, professional or unprofessional, beautiful or ugly. Your teaching approach reminds me of an article I read recently by disabled designer and teacher Kaira Weira. In the article called "The Liberatory Potential of Teaching Design from a Body in Pain," Weira describes the difficulties she faces as a disabled design teacher, but also the abundance it can carry, the potential there is for huge possibility. She says, quote, "Design, with its unique ability to move between the everyday and the systemic, is a necessary tool for disability justice, and the worldling that is required to reorient towards such futurity." End quote. Moving between the everyday and the systemic is definitely something I see in your practice. Suddenly, these students, who are mostly young kids, freshly graduated from high school, that are offered a broad range of critical theory that they can apply to themselves as well as to their surroundings. This is also a type of embodiment, making the personal political, but also making the political personal. Further on in the article, Weira quotes bell hooks from her collection of essays, Teaching to Transgress. And I quote again, "Trained in the philosophical context of Western metaphysical dualism, many of us have accepted that there is a split between the body and the mind. Believing this, individuals enter the classroom to teach as though only the mind is present, not the body." End quote. Now, is she right? In the context of disability, we've been talking about the idea of performing disability in the name of awareness or art. We've all seen it. A non-disabled person is supposed to mimic a disability by wearing a certain costume that limits their movement, wear a pair of glasses that make their vision less optimal, use a wheelchair for a day. The list goes on. I do not believe in this kind of acting, and find it a cheap and even appalling way of impersonating the, or rather a, disability experience. Disability cannot be mimicked. It cannot be a hat that you put on and take off when you feel like it. Disability is a lived experience, not an experiment. So, what for me does embodiment actually mean when we talk about teaching and art? Maybe this definition of embodiment is as fluid as the definition of access intimacy. As you so beautifully state in your letter, access intimacy isn't a set definition, but rather a fluid embodied experience that can flow in and out of the body, something that almost happens without you having to work for it, and appears without a warning. Or, which is maybe even a more abstract way of looking at it, is it a question of reaching kairos, finding or feeling the golden moment? I do not think embodiment only means that you are carrying your own lived experience with you, but you are also acknowledging this experience as something with tremendous meaning. Even though I cannot take away my disability, I do not think my embodied experience looks the same every day. Writing these words down, I wonder about your definition of embodiment. We talk about it often, but what does it feel like?
Dear Mira, Kairos. I had to look that up as I am not trained in Greek mythology. As I understand it, it's about seizing the moment when it introduces itself. I like the active, changeable character of it, something you have to see as a chance being offered, because when it passes, it is gone. I think your lesson landed in our institute at the right time to be seized by others who understood the importance and urgency of what we are creating together. To ask for access to it and to connect us with other people in the institute, practicing interdependency. I am very grateful you brought the Feminist Against Ableism Collective into the Academy. In my own practice as a costume designer, I have just been awarded the Proscenium Prize. And the reason I am mentioning this is because the jury report actually mentions my activism. I quote, in addition, in the social debate and her work as a teacher, she has been passionately campaigning for more inclusiveness and gender equality in the sector for years. I do think I owe this award because of the Black Lives Matter, #MeToo, and climate injustice protest, that a lot of our educational institutions are starting to understand that there is a lot of knowledge being archived and produced within activism. As you stated in your letter, I do not think embodiment only means that you are carrying your own lived experience with you, but you are also acknowledging this experience as something with tremendous meaning. You keep me on my toes when it comes to disability justice issues. And what an ableist expression that is, this balancing on your toes. Able bodies know what that feels like and connected to alertness, because otherwise you will fall. It's a doing again, not something fixed. That standing on your toes means that it makes you extra aware of something, an issue. So, is this what you mean when it comes to putting on prosthesis to understand what it means to approach a disabled embodied everyday experience as a one-off event, rather than the structural difference it encompasses? Why it is dehumanizing? You give such a beautiful example of an interdependent balancing act in your access intimacy class that I suppose you know exactly what keeping someone on their toes means, even when maybe your body is not able to stand on its toes physically. You do know what this embodiment means. As you see, I'm trying to answer this question on what we are talking about when we speak of embodiment. I think that there is a multiplicity of embodiments, and that I am most interested what bodies do in the world, what they perform or are supposed to perform. how I want the new generation of designers to become aware of what power structures we are reproducing through our embodiments and how to encounter that. You captured that beautifully and awkwardly in the video clip you made on all the unsolicited comments you get while you are out in public space. You use this video to introduce yourself and the way people seem to only understand your appearance through a very ableist and patronizing lens. In our last Zoom conversation, you asked me what I thought when I saw you for the first time. I wasn't sure how to answer that question. You also asked the students what they thought of your appearance. They all said they were fine with it, no awkwardness. Could that be true? That when you are there in person as a teacher, the whole question of patronizing you or dehumanizing you doesn't come into the room? And how are gestures of care different from patronizing? Since we made a video lesson out of the Access Intimacy class, you also said that you find it important that you are sometimes not physically there, so that people may be more honest in their reactions. To me, that poses a dilemma because if there is more diversity in the room, a lot of power structures come to the surface and can be understood and dismantled. The nothing about us without us is a very powerful way to have different bodies and their marginalized stories take the stage, to make room and hold space.
Dear Carly, I am writing you right after the research group meeting about embodiment we're both in. The group, consisting of other teacher researchers from different departments in the school, is a monthly get-together in which we, teacher researchers, can share our current ideas, questions, and discuss what's on our mind. This time we shared our last 2 letters with the group. I was present online, you were in the room with the others. As soon as we finished reading, the room was quiet, in disbelief almost. When I broke the silence by asking them what the matter was, I noticed a few red, teary faces. We are touched, someone said, and another teacher said, my tears are because I feel like I'm understanding a complexity now. It's moving to hear a comment like that, not just because it's great to hear that your work is being seen and appreciated, but mostly because this complexity is exactly what I hope to underline when talking about embodiment and disability. As I said before, there is no such thing as the disability experience. The pleasure, luck, and fullness, but also the grief, rage, and sorrow it can carry, take place in complexity. My pleasure doesn't come from trying to walk or stand. My rage doesn't come from not being able to walk. In my last letter, I asked you about what embodiment means to you, and I'm now slowly starting to feel that writing these letters to you, reading the letters I receive from you, are also an embodied experience. I loved your thoughts about embodiment. You say you're mostly interested in what bodies do in the world, what they perform, or what they're supposed to perform. Your work as a costume designer perpetuates that thought so well. The mixture of bright colors, shapes, and camp combinations in your costumes bring up so many questions about performance and bodies. They also, straightforwardly, make me happy. It is the simple pleasures. I don't think I can react to all of your questions in this letter, and I'm also not sure if I'm supposed to. These letters are an exploration of our thinking, and in exploring, a lot remains open. But there are some questions you posed that I would like to touch on. Firstly, your question about how gestures of care are different from being patronizing. My personal answer would be, once again, not so clear and nuanced. These things are very subtle. The difference can be the tone of someone's voice, the way they look at you, the force they use when touching. I think it has a lot to do with autonomy and that you feel that the other realizes it's a two-way street, talking about interdependence. I know that your answer to this question would probably be different. Would you like to share these ideas with me? I would also be interested in how queerness plays a role in this, because I think it does. You mentioned in your letter that I posed the question, what does my appearance evoke to you and the students? Let me be clear that I don't ask this to corner people or to make them uncomfortable. I know there is always a moment of unease that my appearance effectuates, and I want to echo this in the room. I want to allow the uncomfortable truth of discomfort to be acknowledged. I want to be able to talk about the discomfort, not because I want to take it away, although I hope at one point it does disappear, but because my experience is that my existence can function as a mirror. For students, this mirror is an important exploration. In my life, I had many instances in which I was in a public space where strangers would approach me with tears in their eyes, or just straight up crying. Even though it disturbs my otherwise ordinary day to deal with the emotions of strangers, it also fascinates me. Just looking at me, apparently, brings people in a state of terror, angst, anxiety, confusion. My analysis for this might be too shortcut, but I think I embody mortality for a lot of people. Years ago, I spoke to someone who had a wheelchair bed. He lay down the whole day on a bed on wheels and moved horizontally. He told me how his horizontal appearance resulted in people running away from him, being so very scared that they avoided interaction with him at all costs. We jokingly looked at each other until he said concisely, "I don't understand. I am just a person lying down." A body that functions in a different way is something most of us fear. Debility is the preamble to death. Or is it?
Dear Mira, this week I jokingly sent you a drawing of a bird that says, "Stop asking all these difficult questions all the time." The joke, however, is on us. We need to ask the difficult questions, and I was also very touched that reading our letters out loud made the teachers cry and formulate that the tears were about understanding a complexity. Could it be that debility is not the proximity to death, but proximity to our shared humanity? Like there is knowledge in not fitting in, and in staying vulnerable, not trying to become part of the dominant rules by toughening up? As you show us through this statement, my pleasure doesn't come from trying to walk or stand. My rage doesn't come from not being able to walk. There seems to be a whole domain there to start practicing interdependency by finding good questions. It reminds me of the beautiful statements that Patty Byrne brings up together with Stacey Milburn in the video conversation you use in the lesson. My body doesn't oppress me, society does. Or, if I have my access needs met, I am functionally not disabled. Or, my body is fun. This brings me to your question how queerness is a part of this. Everybody that does not fit into the dominant norm, and in our case that would be with cis, preferably male, able and heterosexual and European, and not to forget young, all these categories that are being used, often subconsciously, to make you feel you are failing to be part of this norm, are luckily being questioned now. So as soon as you start to understand that you have value, as Patty Byrne makes you understand through the quotes above, and there could be an exchange of values instead of spending a lifetime of fitting in, then that opens up a whole other way for how we interact and how society could be organized, that we need each other. I do want to come back to the care for a bit. You mentioned that trying to experience able bodies, trying to experience disability for an hour or so was very dehumanizing. In Superfest, the Disability Film Festival, I saw someone training a personal care assistant. She had to be catheterized, and the PA decided to try that on her own body first. I felt that it was important to understand what she had to do by trying and experiencing that herself first. But it also reminded me of how little we have to know about our own bodies, as long there is nothing wrong with it within the able-bodied society we live in. I must admit that I do know I don't pee through my vagina, but would not be able to pinpoint exactly where the pee hole is or what it looks like, just because it functions fine. I just saw this video on Instagram where a female reporter asked cis men in the street if they know if women have to take their tampon out if they want to pee. They all answered yes. It was a video about menstruation poverty. My own naivety scares me sometimes as the complete ignorance of those men. I am not sure where I'm heading with this, but I think it is about how important it is to learn of and from other embodiments by actually wanting to listen to other embodied stories than our own. To dare to want to know the body you desire or reject. Stepping away from universalism and essentialism into the particular and chaotic experiences of the other. Not to solve anything, but to exchange, and to value those stories as knowledges, not to define them, but to let them touch us, and through that make new works of art, because they come with an understanding that failing might be exactly where to start creating.
I'm not sure the camera stopped here. Carly, can you see?
Yeah, they are clapping.
Oh, okay.
That's Laura running in.
I haven't kept an eye on the time, but do you need me to look about questions? Or is Beata going to do? Oh, it's okay. And we have until when? Is it 11?
11.
Yeah. So are you okay to take some questions if people have them?
Of course.
Yeah. And you may not have them.
Or comments, also fine.
Yeah, reaction also.
Hi. I
Hi.
don't know if do you see me there in that camera?
Yes, I see
Okay.
you.
Hi, my name is Pelle. I'm from the Malmö Theatre Academy, and yeah. It's not me. And in any wait. Okay, maybe now. Yeah. So I will be on the panel following this, and during this past days, I've had so many new thoughts. I realized that I have to change minor things in my presentation. May I do this? And I'm wondering if you're able to stay and watch our presentation and take part maybe in the talks afterwards, because I would like to see where the line goes for me in how I use my body in this context, not because I don't really know where the line is in the context of acting training. And it seems that you guys have been talking about this a lot, and people who were here the previous days also brought up really relevant issues for me and my presentation. Yeah. So can you stay?
Ooh.
When is your talk? Is it right after this?
It's 30 minutes after this.
Okay. I might be able to stay actually. So I would be really curious. And you, Car?
Yeah, I think so too. I have to watch my time, but yeah, I think I can.
Yeah, me too. But the thing is, everything is frozen for me. I don't see anything.
Are there other thoughts or comments
Yes,
or
somebody.
reflections?
I just want to thank you because it was amazing for me, you know, to experience it. This is the situation, like we talk about the accessibility, the access, and it is the subject which is not so obvious for me. And when you, Mira, spoke about, you know, reactions, that was really moving. But also, you know, experiencing lying down during the presentation was absolutely refreshing my thoughts about the subject. So just thank you.
Thank you. That's so nice.
Thank you.
I also wanted to thank you so much because it's so important for us, for Warsaw Theatre Academy right now, because we are at the beginning of the deep conversation about access and about actually the definition of embodiment here. Yesterday, me and my colleagues were trying to say a few things about how actresses' bodies are experiencing this kind of architecture, physical, ideological, and mental architecture we have here. And I think I'm totally sure that actually this is the same conversation. It's not the separate conversation about accessibility and about safe space and about discrimination and all other issues. Is the one common conversation with different embodied subjects. So thank you so much for this very rich experience which opened up this conversation, and for me it's really the one kind of dialogue in which we should be.
Wonderful. And I'm also super glad to hear that you're having these conversations. That's actually very great.
Maybe to follow on from that, while people are thinking, I was also thinking yesterday about the conference format itself. I don't mean this conference, but conferences in general. And sometimes it feels as though there's a tension between conversations that we might be having about horizontal relationships in pedagogy, for instance, of dismantling master-pupil relationships, as Broderick was talking about, for instance. But we are doing that in the format of the conference, which maintains often those distinctions between those of us sitting and listening on our chairs and the speaker presenting that knowledge in a sort of very frontal, one-way direction. And this has been a big topic for a group that I am involved in called Performance Philosophy, where we've been trying to explore formats for alternative modes of sharing knowledge. But it was a question also for you, Carly and Mira, about whether you think, is it too simple to say that that mode of the conference paper is intrinsically wrong in terms of power relationships? Is it still possible to have a horizontal relationship, to really think together or be together in a more horizontal way through that mode of thinking? Do you see any hope for it? Because I'm cautious sometimes of saying, yeah, we just need to get rid of it. Because clearly it's not that listening is passive, it's the same model as theatre. It's not sitting in a chair does not necessarily mean that you're passive. We know that those are active practices, and equally participating in a session does not mean that you are being given agency. So I don't mean to create a simple binary any more than we would want to do with frontal theatre and participatory theatre. But I'm just curious how you relate to the standard forms of conferences, conference talks, and so on. How do you think about those things?
I have some thoughts, but I let Carly speak first.
Oh, why?
Because I see you thinking very much, so I thought you probably have ideas about it.
I'm not sure because I'm not that part of. I just started being part of this academic kind of way of producing things or presenting things, or which to me is like I just step into this whole different biotope or whatever, and because Laura, you immediately introduced us to like the different light theater group who actually did this beautiful thing in the performance philosophy conference, in how they could be also part of an academic world by bringing in their philosophical questions. That could be something like, why would you want to cross a street in a motorized wheelchair? Which I think is a beautiful philosophical question. I mean, so opening up these spaces, what are philosophical questions? Or opening up this space. So I'm not sure. And it's also why we, of course, try to also like that is what we also try to question, of course, in our letter, like what is professionalism and why did we make all these rules for professionalism, or why do we think where knowledge is produced? So that's why I also talk about why in activism there's so much knowledge produced also. And I see more and more the hybrids happening. So I do see also in our institute, in the theater school, that all the activist groups are coming in and the other communities are coming in, the same way as we asked the Feminist Against Ableism Collective to bring their knowledge into the school. So I'm not sure. And sometimes I just went to this I was allowed to go to this by the institute to go to the Rage Trans Joy Symposium in Tampere in Finland, and I really enjoyed seeing what all the PhD researchers were about, and I brought all this knowledge back with me, and I'm spreading it into my trans community and the queer community. So I'm not sure where I'm heading with this. It's the same way as I'm writing my letters with Mira, like thinking out loud on, it's also very nice to be able to exchange all, to touch each other on what we are trying to accomplish. So also with the Change Now conference. So I'm not sure if there's a right or wrong there. It's wrong if we are talking about people or about issues, and then we don't talk with the people. So then how do we open up the conferences? Maybe the structure isn't wrong in that sense, but with whom we share this space, that is definitely where it might go wrong, or goes wrong a lot of times. So it's circled. Yeah. So what did you want to say, Mira?
Well, first of all, I think your thoughts are interesting and I can echo most of them, or I would agree with most of them. But I think also what you said, Laura, about the speaker and the listener, I hope what I try to achieve is that the knowledge I'm spreading will marinate, kind of. So then I don't see the listener as a passive listener. I see it as someone who, I don't know, they do this whole thing themselves or together with other people. Um, yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking about this myself a lot because I also, you hear a lot about role models and people that people want to look up to and stuff, which I think is a bit problematic in itself, but it's also important for people to grow. So I don't know. I'm a bit ambivalent about, well, I think dismantling hierarchies is always important and talking about what that means, but maybe just having that conversation already is important enough, or like that's the start at least. Yeah, don't know. I don't have a yes or no answer, but I think what I'm trying to say is that by talking about this and by trying to, I don't know, give the knowledge, share the knowledge, that people share this knowledge again. So then it's not hierarchical to me. Then it's just people share with each other, kind of. Does it make sense at all?
Yeah, really makes sense. Both of those responses were really rich. Thank you. There's one more question. I know we're close on time, but we'll just take one more if that's okay.
Hello, I'm Zosia. I'm a student here from Warsaw. I would like to thank you very much for this conversation and this experience as well. I'm a person who, well, if I may say that, experienced not being fully able for some time. So it was a very beautiful experience for me right now after that time to just be able to listen to that. And Mira, if I may ask you, in your second letter, I think you used a beautiful description of embodiment. If I could ask you to repeat it, because I would like to write it down and think about it a little bit more after the conference. Thank you.
Sure. Let me try and find it. So, oh yeah. Okay, so wait a second. I do not think embodiment only means that you're carrying your own lived experience with you, but you're also acknowledging this experience as something with tremendous meaning. Even though I cannot take away my disability, I do not think my embodied experience looks the same every day. Is this what you meant?
Thank you so much.
Maybe we can also share the letters. They will be in the publication that's coming out of Change Now, so you will also get them then. We're out of time, Carly and Mira. I'm sure maybe if people have other things that emerge out of the listening, they can send those to you or share them with us after the session. But for now, thank you both so much. It was really a really beautiful session. It felt really great in the room. I know you can't tell, but it felt really good for us here. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a half of an hour break. Please meet here in half of an hour.